Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society in general. I am Father George Ehusani, and I have with me in the studio Clem, Nwankwo, a household name, well known for pioneering civil society work in this country. From the 1987, right? When did you start campaign for democracy?
Civil Liberties
CLO, Civil Liberties Organization.
1987.
Through all the, literally through the Babangida years. And then went through all the challenges of the annulment of June 1993 elections and all the aftermath, the violence, the detention, in and out of detention. And thank God that you are alive. You survived that era and have still been involved since the 1999 New Republic and so on. But, Clem, I want us to discuss the recent events where General Babangida, who called himself president, military president at that time, General Babangida came out recently he published his memoirs, and a lot of bigwigs were gathered there, including former heads of state, except Buhari. They were all there, and he raised 17 billion naira to build a presidential library. I have a problem with military head of state having a presidential library, but that's an opinion. But more seriously is that he released his memoirs, and among other things is the fact that he made a public confession that he recognizes that MKO Abiola won the June 12, 1993 elections, and that he annulled it in error, as it were. He would have not done so today, but that he annulled it, short of saying, I'm sorry. I really didn't hear I'm sorry, but he regrets it. This is a singular event that led to the death of hundreds of people, that led to the detention and harassment and victimization of scores of civil rights people. I know yourself that you were one of the arrowheads at that time, Femi Falana, Gani Fawehimi, Bekor and Somkuti, that led to Nadeko developing, And I am asking myself, because I was old enough and I witnessed a lot of that. I started writing from 1990, and I have a record of my articles against all this during the Babangida years. For me to sit down and hear that, okay, indeed, the elections were won by Abiola, and that he went ahead to publish the results that we all knew at that time. We all knew, but we were told to shut up, that the elections were inconclusive. Now, it is the same results that we knew at that time that were published now. And I'm saying, for me, you are a lawyer, is this not a confession of crime? If you had a legitimate election and people from 1990, literally, people were preparing for these elections, which kept on being postponed, 1991, 1992, 1993, from January to June and so on. It was postponed several times. And people, if you remember, there were SDP and NRC party secretariats in every local government, 774 local governments in this country. Some of those things are in the bush now, and a lot of money was wasted. Nothing came out of it, and we returned to full-blown military dictatorship. If somebody comes out now and confesses that you all in the civil society were right, meaning MKO Abiola won the elections, meanwhile he died in prison, and several people were murdered, including those who came out to protest the annulment, should that just be that we applaud and go and sit down? Or in law, is this not a confession of an offense, a serious treasonable offense? Are there no sanctions? What's going on, Clem?
I must confess I've not read General Ibrahim Babangida's book.
Yeah.
I must confess that I'm under no inclination to want to read it. Not because I don't like reading. I have not mustered
The disposition.
Not just disposition. I have to be able to strengthen myself to read what is clearly going to be evidence of someone trying to pervert history. Nigeria went through incredible degradation, indignity. And let no one make any mistake in saying that there is a distinction between two dictators. There were two very brutal dictators in Nigeria between 1983.
Yeah, three dictators.
Three very
between December
brutal
19, yes.
dictators.
Yes.
General Muhammadu Buhari
yes.
was extremely brutal.
Who locked up all the state governors and so on.
General Ibrahim Babangida,
Yes.
who was not only brutal, but tried to be chameleonic about his brutality. And then you had the cap of it all,
Abacha.
General Sani Abacha. So there's no distinction in that period between 1983 December 31st until 1998 when General Sani Abacha died. There is no distinction. It's one long length. Now, you write a book. We all saw the results published. We all saw the man who conducted the elections, Professor Humphrey Nwosu,
yes,
come out to say that the results were right. So there was no dispute about the outcome of the elections. So there is nothing in that book that tells me that there is some revelation.
That's a new revelation, as it were.
There is nothing in that book. The saddest thing about it all was that the country suffered great degeneration. And when you see the businessmen who gathered and were contributing the billions of naira that was contributed, you feel sad for the country, because these were the people who profited in that misery, who profited from the indignity that Nigeria suffered, who profited from a brutal military dictatorship. So when they gather now to thank him for the profit that they made during those brutal, bloody years, then I think that's a big question to ask, how this country has continued to live in that situation. A lot of our colleagues were killed. A lot of us had to be sleeping from one place to the other. We couldn't sleep in our houses.
You know, I have constantly, each time you come on this program, I have constantly referred to those heroes of democracy who are pretty much forgotten these days, because those who came on board immediately after the military rule happened to be also acolytes of the military rule. But those who actually fought, I mean, this is an opportunity to name some of them. I say you are number one because Civil Liberties Organization, one of the foremost civil society organizations at that time, you founded it. And then we have the Olisa Gbakobas, we have the Gani Fawehimis, you have the Bekor and some Kuti. Then you have Gani Fawahime, then you have Femi Falana, and numerous others.
Father, there are quite a lot of people to name, including yourself, Father George, including Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka. You remember that you provided refuge for us in the Catholic Secretariat sometimes, yes, when we were in hiding,
yes,
or when we needed to hide to hold meetings. Yes. So the names are a lot.
Many, yes.
Alawa Kabashoron, who was president of the Bar Association. So many people. And I keep mentioning an instance where we were going to have lunch, and we were all at the venue of the lunch, and one person was to join us, Kudirat Abiola. On her way to that lunch that we were all waiting for her to come, she was killed, yes, in broad daylight in Ikeja, yes, in Lagos. So there are so many people who contributed so much. Not, of course, forgetting to mention M.K. Abiola himself. Who died in that. So I think the book is revolting. I think that if you were going to write a book, it was for you to come out, General Ibrahim Babangida, to not tell us the story that we know.
We know the story only too well.
Or try to be clever about your explanations of the brutality and infringements that you committed in this country. This country suffered incredible degeneration under General Ibrahim.
And we have not survived it.
And the levels of deterioration in national values is what we are suffering today. Of course, we did have, and the only reason that we got out of dictatorship, apart from the fact that human rights organizations fought it. Civil society is a new phrase.
Human rights organizations.
Human rights organizations fought the military to a standstill. Abacha died. And then we have what you would call a benign
military
dictator. Head of state come in. And agreed that given that Nigeria had gotten to the point where there must be a resolution of the impasse, conducted elections and left office quickly. Of course, they brought in from prison President Olusegun Obasanjo, who
had been accused of plot of being
who was going to be killed.
Yes.
By the dictatorship. He came out of prison, and I think it was difficult that for him, I would think, that he would bring to account General Babangida, because those were part of those who sprang him out of prison and helped him to become president. So you couldn't contemplate that he would begin to have the retribution. And that's one reason why, of course, General Ibrahim Babangida will get up today and tell his tales in his book, which he called, I don't know what the name is.
Johnny in Service.
Johnny in Service. You didn't render service to this country. You destroyed the country. You destroyed our national values. You sat in power. You plundered national resources.
There are people who believe that even though there was corruption in Nigeria, but under his tenure it was liberalized and made the order of the day.
I think national values were severely deteriorated under General Ibrahim Babangida, and of course General Sani Abacha made no pretenses about his own escalation of the dictatorship. And certainly, I don't know who would be interested. Maybe a study in dictatorship should be what the center that he's going to call should be named. Not presidential.
A study in dictatorship.
Yeah, not presidential
because
library.
The concept of presidential library is a democratic concept. It comes
General Babangida was never president of this country. He was a military dictator.
It is he who called
sat in
himself
office.
president.
Yes. We don't regard him as president. He sat in office from 1985 to 1993 and left in disgrace. He was basically sacked by his second in command, second in brutality, General Sani Abacha. And he was afraid of General Sani Abacha. That's why he left office. It had nothing to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, how could... I have only seen snippets of the book, I must confess, but how could somebody who is military head of state, meaning chief dictator, the one that calls the shots, the one that can ask anyone to resign or sack any military person, how can you come out and say it's like your subordinates were too powerful for you?
Well, what it shows is that, he sustained himself in power by the brutality that was reinforced by his subordinates, and he couldn't survive without them. And when they decided, they got rid of him.
Yeah, when they decided it was time.
Yeah. But it's a shame that this country has not been able to recount and be able to exorcise itself from that era. General Babangida refused to testify before the Justice Oputa panel. He went to court. He secured a court order to stop his appearance or even publication of the report from that panel. So,
and you remember how we came up to publish some of that Oputa panel. Because, I mean, he refused to appear. And after 2 years of Oputa panel daily televised on TV, then it was an exercise in futility because he got a court order that the report should not come out. And Nigerians will get up to applaud such a person.
I don't know who is applauding him. Like I said, all of those businessmen who profited from the dictatorship, the blood era, were the ones contributing money to that. Nobody who has values of democracy or what a sane society should be would applaud that era, and I think it's a shame that what you should be setting up really should be a center for the study of dictatorship.
Somebody has suggested that if this country is going to make progress, there should be a hall of shame on the one hand and a hall of fame on the other hand. That we should have in a place like Abuja, a place like Lagos, that we should have two structures. One, a hall of fame, where the true heroes of Nigeria are celebrated with all their memorabilia, and then those who have brought the country to the mess we're in now should be celebrated in a hall of shame.
I think that hall of shame exists in the hearts of all persons who went through that brutality, in the families that suffered brutality, in the families that lost loved ones, in the families, in the children of those who were killed. You had military officers put into a C-130 airplane and crashed to death in Lagos in that period. You had people assassinated on the streets. You had MK Abiola killed in broad daylight in the presence of
some people escaped by whiskers. Pat told me escaped by whiskers. Alex Ibru
had the scar before he died.
Yes.
Our colleague Olisa Agbakoba had the punch in his eyes to show for it.
And he was actually in prison.
And was in prison
when Abacha died.
Yeah. Bekor and some Kuti, probably his death was escalated by the ill health that he acquired during detention. Lots of people.
Even Gani Fawe, he made a number of times. He went to Gashua.
Gani Fawe always had his bag packed, knowing that he was going to be a constant pick. From Fela Nikolakpo Kuti was killed in that period because he constantly was a target of so-called NDLE officials who found every excuse to go after him. The ill health that he suffered in the last days of his life was as a result of one of those detentions. But he's one of the biggest heroes of democracy in this country when you see the war that he waged against dictatorship of the military. So it's really very sad for this country that this book is being launched, and whoever has written it for whatever purpose.
What will be your answer for people who say, look, everyone has his right to tell his own side of the story? Do we have enough books and articles written on the side of the majority of Nigerians who suffered, so that if somebody says, oh, Babangida has his right to write his own story from his own side, do we have sufficient documentation of the other side, meaning the side of people who suffered, who are victims of his dictatorship?
There are quite a few books that have been written by different activists on what they went through. It will be important to have an aggregation of this and create some access for Nigerians to read it. Unfortunately, those books were not launched in grand style at the Hilton Hotel, where big monies were given to build what should rightly be called a study in dictatorship, brutal dictatorship. But certainly, I'm going to struggle to read that book, I must say. I would need a lot of courage
because
to do
actually
so.
It will bring some painful memories.
It will bring painful memories, and I to be honest with you, it'll be difficult to see the children of MK Abiola read that book because it'll be revolting for them. Kudirat Abiola, several others who were killed, children of Beko Ransom Kuti, Gani Fawahimi, who died. All of these people died as a result of the pain that they suffered under this very brutal period of Nigeria's history. It would be a nightmare to read the book.
Finally, let's discuss this whole, because you have constantly mentioned values that through this period of dictatorship of Buhari, of Babangida, of Abacha, Nigeria degenerated a lot in terms of values. And it is when you talk of nation building, it is values that build nations. So if we have lost so much in terms of values, to the extent that we saw what we saw recently, in terms of some people literally applauding this person who had destroyed the country this way, how do we set about rebuilding values in this country? How do we set about promoting truth, justice, respect for human life, respect for the dignity of human persons? How do we set about beginning to train our people about what political power is supposed to be for, rather than self-aggrandizement and selfish primitive acquisition? How do we set about? Because really we are at ground zero right now.
I think that values have not risen from where the military left it. Perhaps it has even degenerated. I think when you look at the conditions that led to the military intervention in 1983 with the civilian government, it's no better today. But again, when we know what we experienced under military dictatorship, then of course we must continue to see how we can continue to build our democracy. And it's going to be incremental. The Lux Terra Foundation is doing incredibly well in an incremental way to build values, training leaders, training and imparting values to persons who are in different calls of life in this country. We need a lot more of that. There are different leadership institutes. We need to look at our young people who are growing, and it's a responsibility of every parent to know what kind of values that they want to impart to their children. I think that with all of these incremental efforts by everyone, hopefully we'll find a leadership one day in this country. We don't have that leadership today, but we'll find a leadership one day that would say, look, we've had enough. We have to correct these issues, because all of the ills of civilian rule of 1983 are repeated.
They are there, and even worse.
Corruption levels are high. Leadership is poor. There is no visionary leader who says this is where we are headed as a country. Living conditions in the country today are worse than ever. Government is more nonchalant than ever. So when you look at the situation in the country today, it is very, very, very bad.
In 1993 or 1983, when they came in December 31st, 1983, we had middle class. We still had some middle class.
We did have that.
Today, it has all been eroded, and you have a crop of 2, 3, 4, 5% Nigerians that have all the resources, and the rest of Nigerians are in abject poverty.
The levels of poverty have increased. You still have a middle class today, very small, very tiny, people who are just barely surviving. You have those who are not surviving, who cannot afford meals, and you and I suffer from that situation every day, because whatever little we have, we have to share.
You have to share, yes.
And the more you share, the more, quite frankly, your own living condition goes down. So it's a very shameful thing, the way resources are used and managed in this country. We can only hope that one day there will be a leadership, and that's the call on Nigerians.
You work a lot in the legislative setting. How much more are we called upon to do with regards to training for leadership? Because, I mean, you've been engaged in that, and with what you see on a daily basis, what is the hope for the immediate future? for a change in the conduct of leadership, in the perception of what leadership is. Because when you think about it, you're asking yourself, are things likely to be different in 2027? Are things likely to be different in 2031? Because when you say the caliber of people you are seeing that are getting into leadership, that are aspiring for leadership, you're asking yourself what hope there is.
You know, there are people who say that you can build discipline and build values from the bottom up. My attitude is different.
It's hard.
You will have to have leadership built from the top down. You will have to have an enlightened leader.
Crop of leaders, network of people.
And it's happened, it's possible.
And look at Singapore. We were not different from Singapore in 1965, but with enlightened leadership, leaders that have enlightened self-interest. Lee Kuan Yew and his team, they built a country that is the envy of everyone now.
So I think that's what is missing here. But here you have people get into office, they are stealing. You are wondering, all of this monies, where are they taking it to? Some are in their 70s, some are in their 80s. They are continuing to steal.
No, they are stealing in order to be in power and
yes, I can understand that, Father. I can understand people wanting to be re-elected. But my point is, the best way to get re-elected is by what you achieve.
It's to serve the people.
And I think that people have made so much money that even the cost of paying for an election has been met, and yet they continue to steal. And someone has described it as some level of insanity.
Oh yeah, it is, of course.
Because nothing explains the stealing that goes on.
Of course it is insanity. Unfortunately, we will be ending it on this note that there is so much insanity in the land with the monumental level of corruption in a country that most people have been reduced to dehumanizing poverty. It has to be insanity for people to continue to steal what their children and grandchildren do not need. We pray that somehow the good Lord will intervene and put in the hearts of educated Nigerians, elite Nigerians, whether it is in the political or economic or religious sphere or corporate sphere, put it in our hearts that we get better when our environment is improved. Yeah. And that we are not better when we alone are living life of people in Beverly Hills in California, while our people are living in dehumanizing, destitute poverty. I pray that in your lifetime and in your children's lifetime, that this society will be better, so that the sacrifices that people like you made will not be in vain. And so that we won't find reasonable Nigerians gathering to applaud people who should be in a hall of shame. Thank you very much for
Thank you, Father. My privilege. Thank you.
Thank you.